through Thursday, and there you will get opinion, analysis, debate, and I'll cover stories that nobody else dares to touch. You've been cancelled. Join the club.
Oh, my goodness me.
And then for the last 15 minutes, talking pints. We're over a drink. We have a civilised conversation with someone. We very often disagree, but we do it in a grown-up way. Come and join me on Farage.
Hi there, it's Stephen and Anne.
At breakfast from 6 a.m, you'll always be caught up with everything you need to know, the latest headlines, opinions and debates.
We'll bring you the good news and the bad, but most of all, we're here for you.
Remember, send in your views and let us know what you would like us to talk about.
That's because we're your news channel. And every morning at 6 a.m, it's breakfast on GB News.
Well, all of the constitutional niceties have been observed. Liz Truss is now our Prime Minister. She's made her first speech on the steps of Downing Street. I'll be asking you to comment and asking you whether she's got off to a good start. I've got a big, very wide range of experts, everything from the energy crisis to the economy, to what's happening in the English Channel, to whether Boris might think about coming back for a return. And on Talking Pints, Michael Cole will tell us what it was like in Downing Street back in 1979 when Mrs Thatcher was there. But before all of that, let's get the news with Polly Middlehurst.
Nigel, thank you. Very good evening to you. The new Prime Minister Liz Truss has vowed to create an aspiration nation, promising to tackle the issues she believes are holding Britain back. I'll tell you about her first address to the nation outside Downing Street in the moment, but just let me tell you this. From the office of the UK Prime Minister, number 10 Downing Street, within the last minute, I can give you the news that the Right Honourable Dr Therese Coffey MP has been appointed Secretary of State for Health and Social Care. She will also be the Deputy Prime Minister. That breaking news just into us in the last minute from number 10 Downing Street. Therese Coffey was widely expected to be appointed Health Secretary, has indeed taken up that position, and she is also the Deputy Prime Minister under Liz Truss. Well, in Liz Truss's first address to the nation outside Downing Street, Ms Truss praised her predecessor, Boris Johnson, calling him a hugely consequential Prime Minister. Acknowledging the challenges facing the country, she also spoke of a bold plan to grow the economy through tax cuts and reform, whilst taking action to secure our energy supply. She said she's determined to deliver.
We will transform Britain into an aspiration nation with high-paying jobs, safe streets, and where everyone everywhere has the opportunities they deserve. I will take action this day and action every day to make it happen. I am confident that together we can ride out the storm, we can rebuild our economy, and we can become the modern, brilliant Britain that I know we can be.
Well, if you're watching on television, you can see the moment Liz Truss walked into number 10 for the first time as Prime Minister. She was accompanied by her husband and, of course, greeted traditionally by applause from Downing Street staff as she went through from the main lobby into the back rooms. Ms Truss, Britain's 56th and third female Prime Minister. Well, Liz Truss will now begin to build her cabinet with several appointments expected to be announced this evening. We've already told you about Therese Coffey this evening, but one MP who won't be playing a key role is Dominic Raab, the Deputy Prime Minister, outgoing Deputy Prime Minister and Justice Secretary, has announced he's stepping down, saying he's looking forward to supporting the government from the back benches. So, of course, replacing him as Deputy Prime Minister is Therese Coffey. Well, Transport Secretary Grant Shapps has stepped down, along with the Health Secretary Steve Barclay. All were prominent Rishi Sunak supporters. And the Levelling Up Secretary Greg Clark has also left his role, as has Northern Ireland Secretary Shailesh Vara. The US President, Joe Biden, congratulating the new Prime Minister today in a tweet, said he's looking forward to deepening the special relationship between the two countries and working on global challenges, including continued support for Ukraine. The White House has confirmed the President will speak with Liz Truss this evening. Well, earlier, Boris Johnson tendered his resignation to Her Majesty the Queen in Scotland. Mr Johnson and his wife Carrie spending almost 40 minutes with the monarch before leaving Balmoral. Away from politics today, the Scottish Government is introducing emergency legislation to freeze rents in Scotland as part of a major plan to deal with the cost of living crisis. Scotland's First Minister, Nicola Sturgeon, announced a temporary hold on evictions as she presented her programme for government. She also said ScotRail fares will be frozen until at least March and confirmed an energy strategy will be published in the coming year. That's it. You're up to date on TV, online and on DAB+ radio. You're with GB News, where now it's time for Farage.
Good evening. What a busy day. 7:30 this morning. Opposite number 10, Boris Johnson gave his resignation speech. We'll analyse some of the things he said in that and whether perhaps he somehow still lingers and longs to come back to that very office. He may well do. Liz Truss, of course, went to see the Queen. She flew back down. She stood outside number 10 Downing Street. It was all a bit of a farce, actually, because the lectern was put out. It rained. The lectern was put back in. She gave a speech. I want, as I said last night, to give her every chance. When she said I was elected as a Conservative and I will govern as a Conservative, I want to give her the opportunity to do so. I didn't think today was particularly inspiring. She focused on the economy. She said we need more broadband, we need more roads, we need more houses. Well, I thought the Conservatives have been saying that for the last 12 years. She talked about energy. Clearly there is a price cap coming of some kind this week. She just about mentioned any energy supply, but nothing specific. But one big pledge that she did make outside Downing Street today, and it was this on the National Health Service.
I will make sure that people can get doctor's appointments and the NHS services they need. We will put our health service on a firm footing.
Now, that's a big promise. Given that we're now spending 12% of GDP on the NHS, she says that before the next election, you will be able to get a GP appointment. They are going to cut waiting lists and you will get the treatment that you want. That is a very, very big promise. Well, you tell me. Is Liz Truss off to a good start? Let me know your views. Farage@gbnews.uk. As I say, I wasn't particularly impressed today. I thought it was rather flat, but I'm hanging on to what she said yesterday and one or two of the things that she has promised. I probably will end up being extremely disappointed, but I'm trying for the moment to keep hope, and I'm doing so because I feel that we are literally on a precipice beneath which is a total collapse of economic confidence in this country. So she really has a very important job to do. Now let's get to number 10 Downing Street and be joined by GB News' political editor, Darren McCaffrey. Darren, good evening.
Hello, Nigel. The reshuffle is well and truly underway here tonight. Therese Coffey has literally left in the last couple of minutes. She is the new Deputy Prime Minister and Health Secretary. Clearly, health is one of the key priorities, isn't it, for this incoming government? But she will, in some ways, be the second most powerful figure within government. Previously, had served as the Work and Pension Secretary. She's a very close ally of Liz Truss. I can tell you also inside that famous building behind me at the moment is Kwasi Kwarteng. He is almost certainly going to be the next Chancellor of the Exchequer. Also inside there we've got Brandon Lewis, who's just entered. Much speculation that the former Northern Ireland Secretary could become the new Justice Secretary. James Cleverly is inside. He is tipped to be the new Foreign Secretary, taking over from Liz Truss. And Suella Braverman is also inside, much mooted as the new Home Secretary, taking over from Priti Patel. So it has already begun. I have to say, we've had very few surprises thus far when it comes to this reshuffle. Let's just see who's emerging. There he is, the new Foreign Secretary, or the new Chancellor, I should apologise, Kwasi Kwarteng, in fact, walking through the Foreign Office, which you can to the Treasury building. Nigel, he's got a hell of a task on his hands, hasn't he? Trying to avert what the Bank of England think might be a prolonged recession, and at the same time also trying to tackle this big issue of energy prices. We're expecting an announcement on that later on this week.
Darren, thank you very much indeed. Keep us up to date. And that was Kwasi Kwarteng, who has now officially been appointed Chancellor. I can tell you at home who is out. Priti Patel is out, Nadine Dorries is out, Nigel Adams is out, Dominic Raab is out, Grant Shapps is out, Steve Barclay out, Johnny Mercer out, Andrew Stevenson out, George Eustace out, and Greg Clark out. So a lot of people, a lot of the old guard gone. And it looks like Liz Truss is going to appoint a cabinet of people that know her well and are loyal to her. And I have to say, given the urgency with which they have to deal with the massive problems facing this country, I think having a team around you that you can actually trust is probably the right thing to do. Now, Boris Johnson spoke at 7:30. I want to highlight a couple of things that Boris Johnson said. Just have a listen to this.
And the torch will finally be passed to a new Conservative leader. The baton will be handed over in what has unexpectedly turned out to be a relay race. They changed the rules halfway through, but never mind that now. And like Cincinnatus, I am returning to my plough. And I will be offering this government nothing but the most fervent support.
Well, that was Boris Johnson, and joining me, his biographer, recent biographer, Tom Bauer. Tom, strange, wasn't it? I mean, you know, this shouldn't really be happening, but it's become a relay race. I'm handing the baton over because they changed the rules halfway through. Is Boris Johnson in denial about what's happened?
Oh, totally in denial and delusional, and has been all the way through. I mean, that's probably why he's being turfed out of Downing Street. He didn't understand the rules. They didn't change the rules. They stuck to the rules. The problem is he didn't. And you can't lie in office. You can't lie to the Commons. But worst of all about Boris was that he betrayed the ideology. He wasn't, in the end, a proper Conservative. He didn't stick to the vision. Taxes went up. He was not good on energy. He wasn't good on the economy. He didn't like being with businessmen. All the things which a Tory Prime Minister should, and Tory leader, he betrayed. And in the end, I think that is really what brought him down.
Yeah, he's clearly not recognising that. And then he talks about Cincinnatus. He has to use, doesn't he? He has to use this classical education of his, despite the fact that less than 0.5% of the country would even know what he's talking about. But Cincinnatus did come back to office, didn't he?
Well, there's no doubt Boris imagines he will come back. And I think if he does various things, he might have a chance. But really, what he did by that quote is actually reveal the greatest weakness he had as Prime Minister. He really did base his whole understanding of government on ancient Rome and ancient Greece. He never bothered to read a single book about how Westminster and Whitehall work. He never consulted the former cabinet secretaries about how you get civil servants to do what you want. And so he really did think that he was the Roman emperor, and that was one of the reasons that he failed, because he just couldn't govern.
You talked earlier about energy, and he became obsessive about net zero, about rewilding 30% of the countryside, build back beaver, and some of this stuff that he came out with. And there are many that think that perhaps it's Carrie that had a very big influence on him.
Well, I think she's one of the most maligned influences any Prime Minister has faced for a long time. I think that his downfall was very much because he relied on Carrie. At the end of the day, he went upstairs, and normally you'd go upstairs to get some stability and sense. But Carrie, even the dress she wore today, revealed in this ridiculously high-profile pink dress that she wanted to be the one who was the star amid all the grey suits. It's all about Carrie. And when he went upstairs, it was all about Carrie as well. And you saw the way he clung onto her hand. It was really as if a man was drowning. And I fear that that's very much where Boris is. He's great on the 5-minute speech. He can deliver it. But deep down is a very unhappy, troubled man, a man who had an unhappy childhood and has had a very distraught, in my view, distraught marriage. I mean, he should never, ever have put himself in a position of losing Marina Wheeler, his long-standing wife.
Now, he'll go off and make money, and the Americans will love him, and they'll laugh, and he'll be good, because he is good at after-dinner nonsense. He does it very, very well. But you still think he could come back?
I do, because he'll want to. And Boris has this unbelievable willpower. And he'll find enough people in the Tory party who will believe if Liz Truss loses the election, he will say, if only I'd stayed on, I'd have won the election. And so he'll seize himself now as the Churchill figure in the wilderness years. And the wilderness years ended, of course, with Churchill coming back and being the great hero.
But winning back the trust of the Red Wall voters won't be that easy, will it?
No, but you know what's going to happen between now.
And he is
10 years.
Yes, and of course he's had many downs in the past. You may well be right. I cannot let you go, Tom Bauer, without asking you about the visit. I mean, aren't we lucky? The visit to the United Kingdom of Meghan and Harry and the speech she gave up in Manchester yesterday. What did you make of that?
Well, I think she's the most fantastic actress. I think she is another delusional person. She and Boris are getting on very well. I think her resilience, her ability to shove aside all the heap of dirt I've proven about her in my book and still come up smiling is remarkable. And she's going to fight. She's going to, I think, she and Harry are going to be a class act and they're going to do their best to damage the monarchy. That is the tragedy.
And no time to go and visit their 96-year-old grandmother, who I thought in that photograph today, shaking the hand with Liz Truss, looked very frail.
Very frail, and it's shameful the way they behave. Because, of course, as Meghan showed at Wembley the other day, or in Manchester the other day, it's all about Meghan. It's all about Meghan. It's not about the Queen.
Tom Bauer, fascinating observation of these people he studied so deeply and written great books about. In a moment, we will go through the economy. We will talk about the team that Liz Truss is building around her in number 10. Is it going to be better than Boris's team? Will she be a boss? Will she be in control? We'll talk about the energy crisis. Does she really have any solutions? And is putting a cap on the wholesale price of gas really the right thing to do? All that and more in we literally just heard James Cleverly has been appointed as Foreign Secretary. So no great surprises so far. Back with you in 2 minutes. Great stuff. Thank you. Enjoy.
We are GB News.
And we'd like to say thank you
To each and every one of you.
for helping our great nation
find its voice
We're absolutely everywhere.
across England, Scotland,
Wales and Northern Ireland. On TV,
on radio and online.
we're proud to be
The People's Channel, Britain's
news channel.
On the Mark Steyn Show, we cover the stories a lot of people are scared even to mention. The stuff that really matters with some of the world's biggest thinkers.
Now is his opportunity to kind of take the steering wheel of history.
Break away from the flop at 8 o'clock on GB News with the Mark Steyn Show.
Hello, I'm Esther McVeigh.
And I'm Philip Davis.
Whether you're watching or listening on TV, online or on radio, we handpick the latest stories, debates and expert opinions for your weekend. So whether that's politics, news or showbiz, we've got it covered.
Join us every Saturday morning at 10 o'clock on GB News.
Join my show, Farage, 7 p.m. till 8 p.m. Monday through Thursday. And there you will get opinion, analysis, debate, and I'll cover stories that nobody else dares to touch. You've been cancelled. Join the club.
Oh, my goodness me.
And then for the last 15 minutes, talking pints. We're over a drink. We have a civilised conversation with someone. We very often disagree, but we do it in a grown-up way. Come and join me on Farage.
Hi there, it's Stephen and Anne.
At breakfast from 6 a.m, you'll always be caught up with everything you need to know, the latest headlines, opinions and debates.
We'll bring you the good news and the bad, but most of all, we're here for you.
Remember, send in your views and let us know what you would like us to talk about.
That's because we're your news channel. And every morning at 6 a.m, it's breakfast on GB News.
I asked you, is Liz Truss off to a good start? What did you make of her presentation outside number 10 earlier on today? One viewer says the answer is no, it was dreadful. Gosh. Ron says, let's wait and see. It won't be long before the mainstream media are in her back like they were with Boris. Well, I tell you what, if she proposes radical reform and change, they will be on her case. Absolutely. Audrey says, totally lacklustre Truss, more platitudes and generalisations. Well, sadly, Audrey, I too felt that it was rather cliché-ridden today. And Mick says, Nigel, give Liz Truss a chance. I am genuinely giving her a chance. I think we'll be hearing some tough talk on immigration, but it will come from Suella Braverman. Well, it's interesting, Mick, that you mentioned that, because one of the things she did not mention outside Downing Street today was immigration or what is happening in the English Channel. And I'll be with GB News' Mark White in a moment to discuss the latest news on the Albanians coming into this country in such huge numbers. Didn't mention it at all. Suella Braverman, if we get confirmation that she's been appointed as Home Secretary, well, had I been a Tory MP, I would have voted for Suella Braverman, because she was the only one saying unequivocally and clearly, to get a proper Brexit, to get back control of the borders, we've got to leave the ECHR. So there is some hope. And folks, I am giving Liz Truss a chance, all right? I promise you. Now, joining me is Tim Montgomery, former advisor to Boris Johnson in Number 10, contributor here to GB News. Tim, you were there inside the absolute chaos and nonsense of a Number 10 with Cummings, with
It was eventful, let's just say, Nigel.
Well, there are almost days you'd rather forget in a way.
And look, I've got lots of scepticism about Liz Truss, but like the people emailing in, I think she deserves the benefit of the doubt. We all need her to succeed.
We do.
Families worried about energy bills, small businesses worried about going to the wall. Even if you're a Labour supporter, we need this Prime Minister to succeed. At least give her a week's grace to make the kind of energy announcement that we need. And look, I was in Downing Street briefly with Boris Johnson, and it was massive dysfunctionality. It was chaos that I don't think has still been understood.
Didn't Partygate show that? I mean, in a way, his own staff and the way they behaved and the lack of discipline got him into trouble, and perhaps his lack of leadership allowed them to do that.
And frankly, some of the people weren't nice. There was just a lack of human decency amongst some of the people in Number 10. The thing I do know about the Liz Truss people...
And let's just make the point to the viewers and listeners that we're telling you who's the Foreign Secretary, who's the Home Secretary. We're breaking that to you as this show and the next one go on. What Tim and I are talking about is the machinery of government, the people that are there working in the press office, working closely with the Prime Minister. And this new team of people, you know many of them well.
I know many of them well, and they're good people. And they're close to Liz Truss, and there's almost a family sort of feel to it. You know, Nigel, when Margaret Thatcher was Prime Minister, she had a Downing Street a fraction of the size that Boris Johnson had. Downing Street used to be a home. There were a few people like Bernard Ingham, who was her press advisor, who dealt with the media. If they needed someone else, they would bring them in from outside. It was an intimate operation of trust and coherence. Boris Johnson had this massive operation. It was more like an office and a business, and it didn't work. Liz Truss, I think, is going to try and restore a Downing Street that is much more like a place
let's
which
hope she does.
Dignitaries can visit and which will cohere.
Just had it confirmed that Suella Braverman is the Home Secretary. I like the sound of that. I hope she sticks to what she said in the leadership contest.
You've damned her already.
Well, probably, you know, but there we are. No, I think she really believes in it. And
she does.
That's important. And so we think there are better people, hopefully fewer egos than there were, and there's no doubt about, you know, Cummings may be bright, but goodness gracious me. But is she a leader of teams? You know, she's been in Cabinet for 12 years. You know more about the inside of the way the last couple of governments have worked than me. Can she lead teams of people?
I think she needs... Look, the speech yesterday, the speech today fell flat. They weren't good speeches. And you compare Liz Truss's speech to Boris Johnson's speech, and it didn't have any of the charisma or the memorable lines.
Yeah.
But what does it... You and I perhaps are interested and obsess about these things, these moments of theatre. But it doesn't matter. If tomorrow or Thursday, she and her new Chancellor, Kwasi Kwarteng, announce an energy package that will help the businesses and families worried about surviving the winter, nothing else will matter. First impressions in all walks of life matter. Well, if she reassures people, her premiership... People are very pessimistic about her premiership for all sorts of reasons. But if she gets the energy package right, I think she'll win and deserve the grace from the British people that every good Prime Minister does need at their beginning.
There's a whole hope. There's a whole, you know, heap of other problems too mounting up on her desk.
Not least the NHS. I was...
Well, she's promising. She's promising that we'll be able to get GP appointments. It's a big ask, isn't it?
Well, I was at A&E in Salisbury, my home city, a few weeks ago. This was the middle of summer. 5 ambulances were queuing outside. That's the middle of summer, before we have the winter crisis. even if she solves the energy crisis, the NHS could yet ruin her premiership. So I think it's
or the Channel or many other things.
Absolutely, but I think it's incredibly interesting that probably her closest friend in politics, Tiz Coffey, is not only Health Secretary but Deputy Prime Minister. And I think that perhaps suggests that Liz Truss gets the importance of the NHS. Because even if she gets through one thing, there'll be another thing immediately afterwards. She's won the leadership of the Conservative Party, but would you want to win the inbox that she's just inherited?
It's a tough old job. Tim, thanks for the insight into number 10, and maybe Tim Montgomery there giving us some hope that number 10 will not be as chaotic as it was during the reign of Boris Johnson. Now, with that announcement that Suella Braverman has become the Home Secretary, I'm joined by Mark White, GB News' Home and Security Editor from our Paddington studios. Boy, Mark, she has got a very big, very important job on her hands.
Well, a very difficult job, and of course, top of the list is the small boat crisis in the English Channel. It's the issue that arguably did it for the current Home Secretary, now the former Home Secretary, Priti Patel, promises to try to get to grips with this crisis. But month after month, year after year now, that crisis has only continued to get worse, with another 2,100 odd arriving just over the weekend, and even yesterday and today, with weather conditions really quite appalling out there in the Channel, they're still coming.
Yeah, I mean, I simply, Mark, cannot believe that any dinghies came across the Channel in the last 2 days in those terrible conditions. What news do we have when it comes to Albania? Is it still huge numbers of Albanians crossing the English Channel?
Well, interestingly, sources have told me today that they are very concerned that Albanian crime gangs are pushing these boats out in really quite appalling weather conditions, and they fear that it may only be a matter of time before we see another tragedy that we saw on the 24th of November last year. You'll remember, Nigel, we were out in the English Channel together on that day, and as we got back to shore, we got that news that 27 people had drowned. You can see from the pictures there with that yacht out there how bad the conditions are, and it's actually even worse mid-channel. And if you're a small inflatable boat, then the potential for being capsized clearly is ever present. So Suella Braverman, she will have to try to get a grip of this crisis. Key to that for the government, because this is what we heard from Liz Truss, is that the Rwanda policy must work. In fact, she said, Nigel, that she wants to expand that out to other potential willing nations that would take some of these asylum seekers as well. But that all depends on whether they can get this through the courts. And we're still in that process this week of hearing this judicial review, and we're not going to get any judgment on that, at least for a couple of months.
Yeah, so we're going to be in limbo for a couple of months. If we get a really nice September, October, who's to say another 10 or 20,000 can't come? The government really is in a pickle over this. Mark White, as ever, thank you very much indeed for joining us. Well, the economy. It's the economy, stupid. That's what Bill Clinton said, and goodness gracious me, what a mess we are in. My own feeling, and maybe I'm getting too bearish about this, but I think we're on a sort of the edge of a precipice beneath which is a complete collapse of confidence in this country's economy, and I mean that in terms of foreign investors. I even think in terms of those who are buying government bonds, known as gilts. Maybe interest rates have to rise hugely to attract them. I'm feeling pessimistic. I wonder what Liam Halligan, GB News' economics and business editor, thinks. Sterling crisis, cost of living crisis. She's got a lot to do quickly, Liam, hasn't she?
It's a hell of an in-tray, Nigel, not least for Kwasi Kwarteng, who's just been appointed Chancellor. You mentioned sterling. We're down at $1.15 again, pretty much the lowest since 1985. The pound against the dollar. It's partly a strong dollar story, we must say. The US is raising interest rates like crazy. The US is a safe haven in times of global conflict and crisis, etc., etc. But sterling is low against the dollar. That aggravates inflation because our imports become more expensive. And you mentioned gilt. GB News viewers and listeners are smart enough to know what we're talking about. We're talking about the rate at which the government borrows, the cost, the interest on government debt, the 10-year gilt, 10-year debt, that just went above 3.1% for the first time since the aftermath of the global financial crisis. Some people say, yeah, interest rates are going up anyway, but it is quite alarming when the government is about to unveil an energy package that is going to cost somewhere between 70 and 100 billion pounds. To put that in context,
and that's just this year.
Yeah, to put that in context, we spend about 150 billion pounds a year on the NHS. If we do this thing on Thursday, and we probably will, this energy support package, government borrowing for this financial year will double at a stroke.
And our interest on the national debt's already about 90 billion sterling.
It is, which is, you know, getting on for
double the defence budget almost.
Yeah, it's more than we spend on schools.
Yeah,
and this is debt interest payable in some senses to foreign creditors as well as domestic GB creditors.
Now, Trussonomics, it's about cutting taxes. It's about allowing people to have more money in their own pockets, and she believes by doing that, it will stave off recession, it'll keep the economy moving, and it will lead to growth. But there's no guarantee, is there?
No. So Trussonomics, basically, it's the combination of spending more money and lowering taxes, so easing the fiscal side, tax and spend, while allowing the Bank of England, that almost enabling the Bank of England to then very, not aggressively, but firmly and deliberately raise interest rates to bear down on inflation. That's what Trussonomics is. Now, let's have a look at that. She wants to be pro-growth. The high spending bit and the tax cutting bit of the pro-growth policy is the easy bit. The tough bit of being pro-growth is what we call the supply-side reforms. The stuff that made Margaret Thatcher really unpopular until it worked and it made her popular. Things like deregulation, things like planning reforms, things like pushing businesses to do things more efficiently, tackling vested interests that make money out of inefficiency across the economy, a whole range of sectors. If she does the easy bit of her Trussonomics pro-growth agenda, without doing the tough bit, the supply-side reforms, I think the financial markets will take umbrage. They won't. If she does the supply-side reforms and the markets can see she's a radical, reforming Prime Minister, the Thatcher throwback isn't just about the pussy bow and the demeanour, then I think the markets, if she keeps growth going, Nigel, for now, will give her the benefit of the doubt.
Well, I tell you what, she's got one hell of a job on her hands. And to do the tough bit, she's going to get fought by the entirety of the establishment. She's going to be fought by Whitehall. She's going to be fought by some of her own backbenchers. She's going to be fought by the BBC. And we just don't know whether she's tough enough, do we?
We don't know whether she's tough enough. I wouldn't underestimate her. I wouldn't underestimate Kwasi Kwarteng, someone I've known for many years. He's a very thoughtful bloke. You know, he comes from a pretty humble background. Yes, he went to Eton. He went to Eton as a King's Scholar on a scholarship, one of the most competitive scholarships that any young person can sit. And it strikes me that he's got a thick skin, she's got a thick skin. It may be that they're going to win through and go for it and genuinely try and impose some radical reforms across the UK economy. But it's going to look a lot worse, this economy, I think, before it starts to look better.
Liam Halligan. Not an easy thing to hear, but I'm sure it's true. Thank you very much.
I'd rather be gloomy, Nigel, than wrong.
No, OK, I get that. Well, one sector that really does need some very serious thought, and from which we're going to hear something over the course of the next few days, is, without doubt, energy. And overnight, we got some news that came out of the Kremlin. Yes, it came from Kremlin spokesman Dmitry Peskov, and he says that the problems pumping gas came about because of the sanctions Western countries introduced against our country and several companies. So all the nonsense that Nord Stream 1 was shut down for engineering works, frankly, is a load of baloney. Putin is turning the taps off. Well, one man who I sat with here, actually in the green room, 6-7 weeks ago, who postulated that maybe Putin's real agenda wasn't just territorial gain in Ukraine, but it actually was an energy war, was Clive Moffat, gas consultant and former advisor to the government on energy. I hate to say it, Clive, but I think you might be right.
Yes, there's been some different points of view. Siemens has said you don't need to do this, you could keep it going, and they've been involved in working the pipeline Nord Stream 1. So yes, I think there is obviously there's a game being played, and it's about sanctions, and I think inevitably that it's interesting that it takes place at this particular point in time. I have some relatively reliable sources in the trading area, and they say that actually Russia's not actually reneged, as far as they can see, on any major gas contract up until now. And one wonders whether or not time has been allowed for them to get plenty of gas into storage. And Hungary's just signed a new deal with Gazprom, and Germany's up to 60% of its storage capacity.
It's interesting, isn't it? So, yeah.
I mean, I know it's an important issue, but the point is that Europe is 40% dependent on Russian gas, and now it's mostly stored up, not entirely, up to its.
Isn't it interesting that over the sort of last month or two of this crisis, the Germans and others have been building up their gas reserves in case things get tough in the winter? We, of course, can't do that.
No, we don't have that luxury because we only have 2 days of storage, so it's rather academic. So really, we are.
You can't believe. Well, we shouldn't be laughing, really.
Yeah, no, we're dependent on the weather, and also the fact that maybe there's going to be plenty of LNG in the first quarter of next year available when we need it. And this is one of the issues that leads into the current initiative being discussed.
Yes. So we've got, and by the way, Wendy Morton just been announced as Chief Whip, so we'll keep you up to date with all the developments in Downing Street. So, Clive, she is going, we're pretty certain, she's going to put a cap on the wholesale price of gas. That is what she's going to do. The speculation is that'll last between now and the next general election, so it could be 2 years of doing it. That is quite a big blank cheque, isn't it?
It's huge. It's potentially very big. The decision, theoretically, is that if you cap wholesale gas prices in the UK, then you will effectively help forestall the increase in the retail energy cap, at the same time of help industry that buys gas directly from the wholesale market. That's in theory. The problem with this is threefold. One is that it's a blanket measure, and everybody benefits to the same extent. So that it's not really focused or targeted at the people who really need it.
But it's easy to do.
Easy to do. Yeah. Well, it's actually quite complicated to do because you're talking about a lot of contracts between shippers, suppliers, and so on and so forth. So it's not targeted. And the other problem is that it doesn't allow the market to work in a sense that if the cap was allowed to increase slightly, there could well be some reduction in consumer demand as consumers start to sort of do some. And it's not beyond possibility that 10% of consumer demand could be saved through market responsiveness. And if you don't have that, by doing this, to some extent you forestall that market effect. And what you do is perhaps prolong the high level of gas prices in the UK longer than they need to be if the market's been allowed to work. My third issue with this one is, and it's not being talked about, is the risk to supply. Let's assume that the Qataris want to sell gas when we desperately need it at £10 or £15 a therm, and the shippers say, well, we've got a cap. And the cap plus the subsidy we've been taking, JP Morgan or Goldman Sachs, would say, I'm afraid it's not enough, can't do the deal. And the Qatari supplier will say, I'm sorry, we'll take it to China. So we could end up in a situation where, I've mentioned before, that we are not immune to energy rationing, and there's no guarantee that this incredible, expensive scheme would actually underpin supply security.
No, and supply, she's mentioned supply as a word. As a word, nothing. Last quick question. In a real emergency, could we use places like Drax to start burning coal again in a real emergency?
I think we're going to have to. My contacts have told me that engineers at Drax who were really involved in coal production, coal generation, have been called back to advise about restarting and getting the plants back to using imported coal to generate electricity. I understand from Grid or through that in fact measures have been taken or discussed to actually underpin payments, emergency payments to fossil fuel generators like Drax.
So things are happening. Interesting. Clive, as ever, fascinating, worrying, but fascinating. In a moment, on Talking Pints, I'll be joined by Michael Cole. Now, you probably know him as the BBC's former royal correspondent. Yes, he followed the Queen all around the world, but he also followed Mrs. Thatcher all around the world, and he was in Downing Street 40 years ago when she became Prime Minister. Michael Cole in just a moment.
We are GB News.
And we'd like to say thank you
To each and every one of you.
For helping our great nation find its voice.
We're absolutely everywhere.
Across England, Scotland, Wales and Northern Ireland. On TV,
on radio and online.
we're proud to be
The People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
On the Mark Steyn Show, we cover the stories a lot of people are scared even to mention. The stuff that really matters with some of the world's biggest thinkers.
Now is his opportunity to kind of take the steering wheel of history.
Break away from the flock at 8 o'clock on GB News with the Mark Steyn Show.
Hello, I'm Esther McVeigh.
And I'm Philip Davis.
Whether you're watching or listening on TV, online or on radio, we handpick the latest stories, debates and expert opinions for your weekend. So whether that's politics, news or showbiz, we've got it covered.
Join us every Saturday morning at 10 o'clock on GB News.
Join my show Farage, 7 p.m. till 8 p.m. Monday through Thursday, and there you will get opinion, analysis, debate, and I'll cover stories that nobody else dares to touch. You've been cancelled. Join the club.
Oh my goodness me.
And then for the last 15 minutes, Talking Pints. We're over a drink. We have a civilised conversation with someone. We very often disagree, but we do it in a grown-up way. Come and join me on Farage.
Hi there, it's Stephen and Anne.
At breakfast from 6 a.m, you'll always be caught up with everything you need to know, the latest headlines, opinions and debates.
We'll bring you the good news and the bad, but most of all, we're here for you.
Remember, send in your views and let us know what you would like us to talk about.
That's because we're your news channel. And every morning at 6 a.m, it's breakfast on GB News.
It's Talking Pints, and I'm joined by Michael Cole. Welcome to Talking Pints.
Thank you very much.
I know you've been on television for many, many years. You've probably never done it over a drink, have you?
No, I haven't, but I've ordered a white wine spritzer, and I can tell that you've given me some Austrian white wine, and it's very nice. Very nice. It's very nice. I hope that's allowed.
Now, Michael, veteran journalist, BBC journalist, sent off to all the war zones. I've been looking it up, Yom Kippur War you covered, and the troubles in Northern Ireland, and obviously working your way through the ranks of the BBC. How did you get to the coveted position?
Well, I didn't volunteer for it. I was volunteer for it in 1985. The then editor, a rather nice Scotsman called Ron Neal, said, "I want you to be my royal man. I want you to be my royal man." He was very, very patriotic, very, very royalist. He would cry, "Oh, the Queen Mother, you know, the Queen Mother's so wonderful." So I said to him, "Ron, I will do the job, but I have to do it exactly as I did any news job, you know, with the same degree of probity, candour, and fact-checking. It's a great royal story, but you cannot report, Nigel, from a kneeling position. So if something happens, you don't fudge it, you explain it, and you report it honestly, truthfully, and forthrightly, which is what I did. And I went around the world with members of the royal family. I was pleased to do it. You see all sorts of interesting things, the highs and the lows, sometimes amusing things. I mean, interesting, we've seen the Queen, Her Majesty the Queen today, with the outgoing and the incoming Prime Minister. What is interesting, of course, it's the 15th Prime Minister, but it's the 16th time she did it, because Harold Wilson lost. There she is.
Yeah, there she is. And Michael,
She looks a little frail.
She does look frail, and if you look at her right hand,
yes,
there's
bruising,
quite substantial bruising there.
Listen, if we make it to 96,
I get it.
I've got 17 years to go. If I look as good as that when I'm 96, when I'm 86. Now, it's interesting, they chose the blue drawing room. That's one of the few neutral backgrounds, because almost everything in Balmoral Castle, on the walls and on the floor, it's all tartan everywhere. And I remember in 1985 when Princess Diana and Prince Charles went to the White House. President Reagan was in office, and it was a Saturday, so he was dressed down. He was wearing a plaid jacket. And I said, to make his royal visitors feel at home, the president was wearing a jacket identical to the carpet at Balmoral Castle, which was true. Occasionally we had a bit of fun on the thing, but it was a serious job to do, and I did it to the best of my ability.
How did the royal family view you? Do you know the answer to that or not?
Well, I think we always got on terribly well. I had some reasonably good feedback that people used to say to me, do you know the Queen? And I would say, no, but the Queen knows me. That was because that was her business to know who the reporters were. Her press secretary, now no longer with us, Michael Shea, once said to me, 50% of the monarch's job is being seen. And she was always very adamant, as she has today, to do her duty, to be out there, to be seen. That's why she generally wears bright, noticeable colours. Not because she particularly likes them, but she knows that people want to see her, and that makes it that much easier for that to do. It is quite interesting to see the castle. I mean, I went there many times, never inside, I must say, but always covering stories there. In fact, when I was the Scotland correspondent, I went there to Braemar on the coldest day ever recorded in the UK at that time, which was 26.5 below centigrade, and I went there. The temperature was judged by the weather station set up by Prince Albert, because Queen Victoria bought it, and in fact there was a castle there, but they rebuilt it, and they rebuilt it in the style, the Gothic, Scottish Gothic granite style, and in fact it looks very, very similar to Aberdeen City Hall, and that's because it was the same architect. he did Balmoral, and
the Queen loves it there. Yeah.
No, she loves it. She relaxes. Princess Diana didn't like it very much. I mean, given a chance, she would bunk off to the swimming pool in Ballater with the kids and get out of the way. It wasn't her ideal holiday. Yeah. And of course, I think it's wonderful, Scotland, at that time of year, because it hardly gets dark. And it's a wonderful time.
No, it is, absolutely. By the way, Ben Wallace has been reappointed Defence Secretary. No great shock there. I guess unless you like salmon fishing and stalking, then you probably wouldn't enjoy going to Balmoral very much, would you?
No, not really, but they get into it.
I would.
Yes. Well, they haven't asked you yet. No. You'll have to become Prime Minister before that happens. I don't think. Of course, today was the 15th Prime Minister, but actually the Queen has done this 16 times, because Wilson lost to Heath in 1970 in June, one of the 6 general elections I covered for the BBC, and then he came back when he won in 74. So the Queen was obviously adamant that she wanted to be there in a very important constitutional moment. And actually, you know, between Boris departing with her thanks and Liz coming, she actually was the government. The government reverted to her. Boris tendered his seals of office, and before she gave them to Liz Truss and said, form a government, do you think you can form a government? She had the power. I'm not going to say that she wasn't going to declare war on Russia or order a nuclear attack.
It's quite a thought, isn't it?
But she did, constitutionally, our famously unwritten constitution. She actually held the power, and that's why she was quite happy to pass this hot potato on as soon as possible.
You covered her for many, many years, but the other woman that you covered extensively was Margaret Thatcher.
Yes, for 5 years. For 5 years, from before she was elected party leader in 75 to the doorstep of number 10 in 79. And I would say I covered her for 5 years in the journalistic, not the equine sense of the word. But we had our moments, we had our punch-ups from time to time. I remember one on the Golan Heights in Israel. But generally speaking, we got on very well. And I think you've got a photograph of the...
Well, it's very appropriate because Liz Truss, just a couple of hours ago, was given a speech.
Yeah.
On the steps of Number 10.
Yeah.
And, of course, in May 1979, Mrs Thatcher was outside Number 10, and we have a photograph, Michael, of you and Mrs Thatcher.
I hope I'm recognisable.
Which we're going to pop up on our screens.
I'll tell you just the background of that, because...
There you are.
She came back...
Hair was a little bit darker, but you are recognisable.
Thank you very much.
You're very close to her there.
43 years ago, and when she came to the doorstep with Dennis, I said, come over here, come over here. She said, I'm just coming. And she came over, and as you can see the scene, and it was to my microphone. In fact, I'll pull out a bit, because those gloves I'm wearing, those suede gloves, were my father's. He gave them to me. I'd like to remember my father. Anyway, she came out with this lovely speech. It had been written for her by Ronnie Miller, all about Sir Francis of Assisi.
Yes.
Where there is discord, let there be candor, and all of this stuff, saying it wasn't her at all. No. You know, she was confrontational. No. She was quoting St Francis of Assisi. So I let her get out the pre-written stuff, and then I asked her a question which took her aback, but she gave a marvellous answer. I said, what would your father think to see you here today? And she stood back and she said, my father would be very pleased, but he wouldn't be surprised. He always believed in the power of women and their abilities. He believed in my sister, he believed in myself. And he would be, I think he would be proud, but he would not be surprised. And we will not let him down. And I loved that, and I wish the BBC had archived it. And it was, in a way, a little bit more interesting than the pre-written bromide quoting St Francis of Assisi.
Yeah, it was odd for her to do that, wasn't it?
Well, it was not her in character. She
yes.
was going to go in there and be confrontational, and she wasn't going in as a peacemaker. She was going in there as a shaker-upper.
Yeah.
And my goodness, didn't she do it? And maybe couldn't we need her right now?
Well, Liz Truss has said some pretty confrontational things over the last week or two. Whether she's got the guts and the courage to carry it out remains to be seen. After all of that, you went off and worked for Mohammed Al-Fayed, which is extraordinary.
Yes.
That must have been a very up and down time.
Well, that was 10 years. I'd been 27 years as a frontline journalist. My work, I'm saying not me, but my work was twice awarded the Royal Television Society Award for the Best Home News Story of the Year. That was for the resignation of Cecil Parkinson, and also the Brighton bomb, where I and my crew, Bernard Hesketh, now dead, great cameraman, got inside the Grand Hotel and filmed the rescue of Norman Tebbit.
Graphic stuff.
It was amazing stuff. And he came out of that terribly, terribly well. You know, the fireman made sure that when he came out with all the dust, that his pyjamas were in the right place, and you know, and there he was. We were standing there. I mean, we filmed him being gently lowered down this ladder. And there he was on the stretcher in front of me. I'm standing here. And, you know, I had all this experience, 20 years of experience. If I had had no experience, I'd have leaned forward and said, how are you feeling? Yeah. And if I'd done that, it'd have ruined the whole film. You couldn't do it. I wanted to know how he felt, but I didn't have to ask him because it was graphically on his face. Yeah. And I've corresponded with him. He lives in Bury St Edmunds, not very far from where we live. I've corresponded with him in the past, and he was very complimentary, and he was glad that he wasn't a fan of the BBC, but he was glad about the way that we portrayed it at that time. So I was always going to be a frontline reporter, but for 10 years of my life I was a main board director of the Harrods Group of companies. And of course it was a tough job, and I didn't change in any way. I brought the same standards of integrity and candour and straightforwardness to everything I said and did. I never said or issued anything that I didn't believe to be true that I hadn't checked. And it was a difficult job, and some public relations people go through their whole lives without facing even one of the three major stories, confrontations. First of all, there was the takeover battle with Tiny Roland. Then there was the cash for questions, which effectively altered the British Constitution, because instead of the Privileges Committee deciding, a Parliamentary Commissioner of Standards. So those revelations led to a change in the British Constitution.
They did.
And then, of course, the tragic death of Diana and Dodi. And, of course, I knew Diana for 12 years. I knew her stepmother for nearly 50 years. I gave the eulogy at Countess Spencer's memorial service. And also, Nigel, I knew Henri Paul. Dodi was always in and out of my office. He was the boss's son. I liked him. He was a nice guy. I could understand why Diana loved him, and they got on terribly well. And the last time I saw both of them, I've never seen either of them more happy. And I'm probably the only person in the world who knew all three people who died that terrible night. And that led to the most awful week in my life. When I came home after the funeral at Westminster Abbey, just across the river from here, when I got home, I hadn't seen my wife for a whole week. And my wife said to me, "Your whole life has prepared you for the week you've just had."
Goodness me. Goodness me. Michael, thank you for joining me on Talking Pints. Very powerful stories.
Great pleasure.
Thank you.
For hours. Do you want me to hang around, don't you?
We've got a few seconds left. I'll do a couple of quick-fire questions from you, the audience, in Barrage the Farage. Gary asks, is the constant hounding of Meghan Markle justified? Yes, yes, yes. What say you, Michael?
Well, she's just about.
Just about. There we are. We've got time for one more. Robert asks, is Putin winning or losing? The sanctions are clearly hurting him. Some would argue the sanctions are hurting us now more than they're hurting Putin. And just wait for the general election in Italy, where the leading proponents are saying, hey, this is crazy, it's hurting us more than it's hurting him. Either way, we are in quite a fix when it comes to energy. I want to say thank you very much indeed, Michael, for joining me this evening, all the rest of our guests. It's been a pretty important, pretty momentous couple of days in British politics. I'll be back with you tomorrow night at 7, but for now, I'm going to hand you over to Mark Stein.
Thank you, Nigel. Great show. We will try to keep it going for the next hour. We have a new Prime Minister, which is pretty exciting. Perhaps not as exciting as you might think, because she's the fourth in the last 6 years. But we will try and address the implications of what this means with the one and only Toby Young, and also with Kathy Gingell. And Samantha Smith is in studio with us. And she knows rather more about the cabinet outgoing and incoming than you might think. All that is coming up. We'll also talk grooming gangs and vaccine victims and a lot more, all coming up after the weather.
Good evening. I'm Alex Deakin with your latest weather update. Tomorrow, more of the same. Just like today, it's going to be a mixture of, yes, a bit of blue sky, a few sunny spells, but also plenty of heavy showers and a few thunderstorms thrown in for good measure, all swirling around this big area of low pressure that's dominating our weather and will continue to control things, well, for the rest of the week. Around that low, bands of heavy showers drifting north overnight, so there's a chance you may get woken up by a rumble of thunder or a flash of lightning. Nowhere immune from the downpours. There'll be lengthy dry spells between the bands of showers, and it's going to be a pretty warm night as well. The air's coming up from the south, so temperatures again likely to stay in the mid-teens in most towns and cities. And again, it's a case of dodging those downpours on Wednesday. We'll see some sunshine in the morning over parts of the Midlands, East Anglia in particular, central Scotland too. Got a wet start in northern Scotland, and then elsewhere, just we'll watch the showers developing, swirling around that area of low pressure. Gusty winds at times, heavy downpours, not great on the roads. 1 minute it's dry, the next minute you're caught in a downpour and a lot of spray and surface water. But again, still quite mild. Temperatures generally getting into the low 20s. More heavy showers compiling into Wales and the southwest during Wednesday evening. Notice the winds here. That low pressure has just moved in a little bit closer, and that's what's going to happen as we go through Thursday and Friday. The low itself moving over England and Wales. Further heavy, slow-moving downpours on Thursday. Again, Some areas will start with some sunshine, but it isn't expected to last. And particularly eastern parts of Scotland will see thicker cloud and maybe more persistent rain developing during Thursday. Again, quite mild, but temperatures just a touch down, perhaps on Thursday compared to Wednesday, as this low pressure moves in, tracking across the country. More heavy showers quite widely on Friday, but it's exiting, and things look drier for most of us by Saturday.
We are GB News.
And we'd like to say thank you
To each and every one of you.
For helping our great nation
find its voice.
We're absolutely everywhere.
across England.